On, guys, happy hump day. It is Wednesday. Kevin and I are here with you today. It is the fantasy slant that you are listening to right now. It is powered by Pro Football Focus and brought to you by DraftKings.com. Kevin and I are here with you guys every single week, typically on Thursday mornings, but today we're doing it on Wednesday night. There's a good reason for that. Tomorrow's Thanksgiving, and we have more games than usual, Kevin. It was a huge waiver wire week, too. Was there anybody that you were like dying to get off waivers, or is there somebody that's maybe down there that maybe a lot of people didn't pay attention to and might still be available?
Yeah, I guess it depends on the type of leagues that you're in. A lot of the leagues that I'm in have very deep benches, so Rawls and Allen were gone across the board. Luckily, I had quite a bit of Rawls. I picked him up earlier this year and been holding on to him under the assumption that Lynch was at least hurting and you knew that he could perform. So I'm kind of happy about that because I lost Deion Lewis in a bunch of leagues. So it's really Spencer Ware was the only guy that was out there. I don't know if I'm too high on him for the rest of season because you assume Wes isn't going to be out for an extended period of time. But once you have these soft tissue type of hamstring injuries, you never know. It could be reoccurring. So he's a guy that I assume a lot of people are just probably going to spend almost all of their remaining budget on because we're already, heading into week 12 here. There's not a whole lot left of the season, so you might as well just take a shot.
Yeah, one player that kind of hit waiver wires again after last week was James White, and he's someone that I think should be picked up across the board. I know that, the touches were very low last week, even though, he scored twice, which obviously raised a bunch of eyebrows, but I think it's more than that. I think he's going to start seeing more action in this offense with all of the injuries they're having. The Patriots offensive line is just, man, they are decimated. Rob Gronkowski is being held in a block a lot more than he usually would be, which is, part and reason for his lack of production. But it's been a little bit frustrating for the Patriots offense as of late. And we're going to talk about them because we're going to cover every single game today. Kevin and I are here with you. We're going to talk about a lot of different players, but a lot of ones that may be on the edge of sitting and starting. And it's going to start in the first game of the week that is taking place in Detroit. The first Thanksgiving game will be the Eagles at the Lions. Last week, what the heck happened to Eric Ebron, Kevin?
Well, he dropped a touchdown. I know that. But other than that, it didn't seem like he was targeted that much. It was pretty disappointing, but I think it was a game where I guess he wasn't as involved in the game plan. I think there's been a subtle shift that people may not have noticed, the fact that Ebron was putting up a lot of stats when they really had nobody else. Pettigrew was out with an injury also. So I think he's just not quite getting the amount of snaps that he was before. And, that's just the way it goes, the tight end position. If you don't capitalize on those touchdown opportunities, a lot of guys could put up as a goose egg.
Yeah, it was quite upsetting because I streamed him in a lot. If I didn't pay for Gronk last week, I was probably playing Ebron in a lot of DFS, and they both were a huge letdown. On Ebron, yes, it was in the first quarter he dropped that touchdown pass, and unfortunately, Matt Stafford never had threw a touchdown the rest of the game. But speaking of Stafford, he's going to play well this week. I like him a lot as a QB1. Going against that Eagles defense that's allowed 10 passing scores in the last 3 weeks alone. With that being said, they've allowed a touchdown in every single game. Now, Calvin Johnson, we know he's a must-play, but Golden Tate, is this a week where you might suggest owners take a chance on him if they're looking for a wide receiver 3?
Yeah, I mean, obviously it's all dependent upon what else you have. But Tate's one of those surprising guys where he just never really has gotten anything going, despite the fact that he's been targeted. So at least he is getting targeted. So there's always a chance.
Yeah, no, I think if you're gonna, if you don't trust him this week, you're never gonna play him. So you might as well just drop him. But this is a week where it definitely can happen for both Calvin and Tate. Like I said, considering the Eagles have allowed 10 passing scores in the last few games. Speaking of the Eagles, do you drop Jordan Matthews at this point, or is he just more of a sit on your bench and kind of wait until he gets out of this, season-long funk?
Yeah, I mean, I have him in some leagues, and he's still in the kind of that sit on your bench. But if you have a short bench, I wouldn't hesitate to drop him if you're already loaded at the wide receiver position.
Yeah, he didn't even the 4 catches he had for 13 yards last week. It didn't even happen until I think the fourth quarter. He had a big fat donut. I don't know what's going on. And Mark Sanchez started, and he didn't look as good as I thought he would. He was rusty but he turned into 2 touchdown performance, which is what it is. Zach Ertz, just to let you guys know, Zach Ertz is likely going to be out this week. And Brent Selleck is actually a decent streaming option at tight end. Like I said, tight end is kind of a, once you get past the top, maybe 5 of them, it's a crapshoot, including with the fact that Martellus Bennett is going to be out this week. The next game taking place on Thanksgiving will be the Panthers at the Cowboys. Before we, started recording here, I talked to Kevin about the game a little bit, just saying that I feel like this is a game where Dallas can actually win. Tony Romo, I know that there was talk about he's ended some perfect seasons. That's not why I believe it. I just think that Carolina's overdue for a loss. They're on the road on a short week in Dallas. Kevin, and it looks like Charles Tillman's going to be out. Would you trust? I know Terrence Williams caught the touchdown last week. Would you trust him this week with Tillman out and Josh Norman covering Dez Bryant?
Trust is a strong word. I mean, the problem with Williams is you've seen him just disappear at times. I mean, he did it last year. He's been somewhat productive since with Tony Romo back, but it's on limited volume. So I wouldn't trust him, but you can definitely plug him in and hope for something, assuming that Dez is going to be seeing a little extra attention and is going to be seeing a lot of Norman.
Well, yeah, I pulled up some numbers of, Terrence Williams with and without Tony Romo. And it's kind of odd because in the game, the splits, he actually sees the same exact amount of targets in each game, but he averages 9.1 fantasy points with Romo, just 4.7 with other quarterbacks. So obviously Romo likes him a little bit, I shouldn't say likes him more, but he obviously is a big boost to his fantasy value. And Josh Norman being draped around Dez Bryant, I mean, let's be honest, if Dez ends the game with, more than 80 yards, I'd be pretty surprised. He's obviously always got a shot at a touchdown considering, his physical, his prowess around the goal line. So, but another big receiver in this game on the other side of the field, he saw an increase in snaps last week, played over 80% of them. Devin Funchess, is he somebody that you think that fantasy owners are going to be able to trust down the, through the fantasy playoffs?
I mean, I don't think you can trust him. I think he may put up a good game here or there. I mean, this last week, they were obviously decimated across the wide receiver position. He got some more looks with Corey Brown out. I think he may be back this week. So, Funchess' snap percentage hadn't moved at all until last week, and he performed pretty well. But of course, I mean, that was a game where Cam Newton threw, was it 5 touchdowns?
Yeah, he had 5.
So just for the fact that Funchess got, whatever it was, 70 yards and a touchdown isn't the greatest performance in the context of what the entire passing game did. So, I mean, that's just a passing game that's not going to be that fruitful across the board unless you're like Kelvin Benjamin was last year and you're just getting peppered with an insane amount of targets, and Funchess isn't going to have that role.
Well, that's what I was hoping that, with his performance last week, I know it was his first time playing over, I think, 30% of the snaps. He hasn't played very much, and he's been playing pretty well lately. So I was hoping that maybe, with his performances lately, I know they said they wanted him to learn the position because he's just learning the wide receiver position seemingly, whereas Kelvin Benjamin, he knew it. He just may have not perfected it, in his first year with his hands. But moving on from that game, we don't want to stick on one game too long because we have a full slate of games here. The next one, Bears at Packers. Kevin, what are your expectations for Alshon Jeffrey and Matt Forte? And first off, Alshon Jeffrey's Kevin's guy, so to take this as you will. But what's your expectations for those two?
Well, I think the Forte situation is probably a little bit more questionable. I mean, obviously he's questionable as whether he's going to play or not, but he should play. But the question is whether or not they're going to work in Langford a decent amount, whereas, Forte was playing that true workhorse type of role. So I think that's something to keep an eye on. I mean, Alshon's going to be out there. I'm assuming that he's healthy after a rest for the week, that he's not going to be playing limited snaps like he was against St. Louis a couple weeks ago. It's not really a great offensive matchup for the Bears. I mean, I think that their over-under is going to be, less than 20 points. But at the wide receiver position, they're 9-point underdogs. Alshon could get peppered with targets and rack up points, especially in PPR. So I'm pretty confident starting him this week.
I agree, actually. I've had a lot of people ask me if they believe that he's going to be a decoy. And I think that if he plays this week, I don't think he's a decoy. I think Alshon Jeffrey, at this point, we know he's not going to play if he's not feeling pretty much 100%. And against the Packers, he's got a decent track record. He scored in one of the 2 games last year. Even this year, he had 81 yards in week 1, where he was playing coming off of that injury in the preseason. He went
right back to being injured again. So I think he was kind of hampered during that game.
And that's the thing. I think he was playing at less than 100%, but he still managed to do that. And Forte killed him in the first week against, the Packers. So, my take with Forte, if you have another good option, like if you're talking like maybe if you have somebody, like Thomas Rawls and you're debating him or Forte, play Rawls this week just because I would like to see Forte 1 week just get back into the swing of things. Although I do think he's going to be heavily used. I think John Fox goes back to the veteran. We know that he likes veterans. There's no secret to that. But on the other side of the ball, James Jones, last week, 10 targets. Is he somebody that we can sit here and say, I'm comfortable starting? I know that the last 3 weeks, he had 3 catches for 59 yards and no touchdowns. And then all of a sudden he gets peppered with 10 targets. He catches 6 of them for 109 yards and a touchdown. Like, as much as I wanted to, shout from the top of a mountain that I love Devontae Adams this year in fantasy heading into the year, James Jones is the better option right now. And do you feel like maybe the Packers realize that now and they're going to start like targeting him a lot more?
I mean, it's really tough to say. I mean, it seems like this year, I'm not sure what's going on overall with the offense, but there's not seems to be any consistency with these guys getting open, or else Aaron Rodgers isn't able to find them, and I assume it's more the former than the latter. So Jones has been probably the most reliable and efficient receiver if you look at the amount of targets he's gotten and what he's been able to do with them. Obviously, Cobb and Adams are the bigger names. They have more real money tied into Cobb and then draft capital tied into Adams. But at a certain point, Jones has been, he's been more effective than even Cobb. And let's face it, Cobb isn't really doing anything either. So I don't know if you can necessarily trust anyone because sometimes they have low target volume and very touchdown dependent. But I think that Jones is probably just as worthy of your trust as the other two options.
Do you know these lovely tools that we have here at PFF, Kevin? I was looking up Randall Cobb and his lack of efficiency this week, and do you know that since week 3 game, you remember where he had the 3 touchdowns against Kansas City?
Mm-hmm.
Well, ever since that time, Randall Cobb is averaging 1.09 yards per route run. That is dead last in the NFL for receivers that play on a pretty much full-time basis. That is lower than Golden Tate. That is lower than Jordan Matthews, lower than Kamar Aiken. Like, Randall Cobb has been awful. I don't know how he's gotten a pass at this point. Like, I know a lot of people are pointing to Devontae Adams and saying this guy's ineffective and he's going to be a bust and all this and that, but nobody's talking about Cobb this year. And I don't know why. He is third in the league in drops behind only Mike Evans and Amari Cooper. Randall Cobb has been an extreme disappointment this year. Obviously, you're playing him this week against the Bears. He has scored 6 touchdowns in the last 4 games against them, including the one back in week 1. So, in Favre's homecoming, you're playing Randall Cobb. You're probably going to play James Jones too. So, moving on to the next game. This is going to take place on Sunday. It's the Bills, and the Bills on Monday night. I don't know that game. I actually fell asleep towards the end. I didn't make it to the end, and I woke up to Twitter going crazy about Sammy Watkins' butt not getting in. Like, what happened?
Yeah, I don't know. It looks like the refs had misinterpreted or used college rules on what was going on, but I can't blame you for falling asleep. I think that's what Rex Ryan is trying to do to the opposition most of the time.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't know what the heck happened because, like, Sammy Watkins was somebody I liked last week, and I'm sorry if you took my advice on that because I liked him. I thought that they were going to target him. I felt like the Patriots were going to put up some points on the Bills and, Buffalo forcing to throw. Unfortunately, Tyrod Taylor hasn't looked like the same quarterback since his knee injury, and Sammy Watkins wasn't targeted. I don't think he had a single target in the first half. And I know he ended the game with 3 catches for 39 yards, but now Rex Ryan's coming out and saying, we need to force feed him. Like we need to push the issue. Like, what does that mean?
I have no idea what it means. I mean, what they needed to do last week was just throw the ball a little bit more often. I was kind of shocked when they were down in the second half against the Patriots offense. They were just kind of running their normal offense and dinking and dunking it. But I guess we'll see what ends up happening. I mean, Watkins looks like he's doing okay when they're actually targeting him. So I'm not sure if he's not getting open or what the situation is, but it looks like Taylor's not really forcing the ball downfield.
Well, yeah, and then Taylor, he wasn't really stepping into his throws when he was thrown downfield. Like, Sammy Watkins was open. Like, he broke loose, and he had a couple yards on the guys, and he was just being underthrown consistently, stopping, waiting for the ball to get there. And it's never going to work like that. So, I mean, you only wonder what a guy like Sammy Watkins would be if he had a Tom Brady throwing him the ball. Too bad it's past the trade deadline. But on the other side, Spencer Ware, we know he was a big pickup. I don't know if Charkandrick West plays this game. They're talking about it's a hamstring, right?
Yeah, it's a hamstring.
So with a hamstring injury, we've been through it this year. We've seen it. It could be a multi-week injury. I think that they hold him out this week. I don't think he plays this week. So when looking at Spencer Ware, a big downhill runner, he looks really good. I mean, but let's put it in context. He did play the worst run defense in the league, the Chargers, but he did look good. Now, when it comes to Spencer Ware, is he somebody that you would start? Like, we're assuming right now. Let's assume that Charkandrick West is out. Would you start Spencer Ware over someone like a Frank Gore?
Yeah, I think I would. I mean, Frank Gore, he's been playing okay, but the offense with Hasselbeck is nothing great. And then Ahmad Bradshaw continues to get some valuable looks. I mean, you could say it's somewhat fluky that Bradshaw got those 2 receiving touchdowns, but that just tells you that he's getting a short touchdown. That means he's in the game near the goal line. So I think you can at least count on volume and probably goal line usage with Ware.
All right, so here's one more, and it kind of is the goal line thing. Chris Johnson or Spencer Ware?
I think I'd still go with Ware. I mean, it really depends. It depends also on PPR. If you're in a PPR format, definitely I would go with Ware because Johnson's not getting involved at all in the passing game.
Yeah, I like where your head's at. I think I like Ware this week. He's got another decent matchup. Against the Bills, you can't really throw on the Bills despite the contrary belief. You really don't throw on them much, but they can be run on. So moving on from that game, moving into the St. Louis Rams heading to Cincinnati to play the Bengals. Now, here's an interesting question. We just talked about a few sit or start questions. Jeremy Hill, would you start him or someone like Alfred Blue?
God, it's so ugly. I guess I would start Blue because they are a favorite by 3 points, the Texans. So you could get a lot of usage out of him. I mean, Hill, you're basically just relying wholly dependent on those goal line touchdowns recently. So it's tough to count on that.
Well, that was my point. And actually, I did an article and it was put out today in regards to if you still have trading deadlines open. Some leagues remain trading open all year. And Jeremy Hill, he's only scored in 3 games this year. I know he has 7 touchdowns, but he has only scored in 3 games. And even worse than that, he hasn't topped, I want to say the number, I'm going to look real quick while I'm talking about this, but he has not topped 63 yards rushing all year. So when you're talking about a guy that's not getting it done yardage-wise, you're talking about a guy that's only scored in 3 games this year. Is he really a guy that you want on your team in the fantasy playoffs where if you lose, you're one and done? He's very, very inconsistent, very touchdown dependent. I'm along with you. I would start someone like Alfred Blue over him this week. But on the on the same team, Andy Dalton, what's your confidence level with him right now? He hasn't looked like the same quarterback since their bye week. AJ Green, man, it's kind of frustrating with him. Tyler Eifert he scored 11 touchdowns, but since week 6, I think he ranks 17th in yards per route run. So Andy Dalton, what's your take on him right now? How confident are you going into the fantasy playoffs with him as your quarterback?
I mean, I'm pretty confident. He has a couple of shaky matchups, this being one of them against the Rams, but I don't think this matchup is as bad as you might think it is. I mean, they're 9-point favorites, and that could mean them taking the air out of the ball, which of course is bad, but at the same time, I mean, it takes away from a lot of the kind of train wreck type of performances you can have if you're a big underdog. I mean, I think they're, according to the over-under, they should be at 24, 25 points. I mean, that's a good score. So I think he has so much firepower on offense that you did see a dud performance against the Texans, but then you saw a decent performance last week against Arizona in Arizona. So that's not an easy pass defense. And, they were an inch or two away from A.J. Green getting that touchdown and maybe even winning the game at the end there. So I think Dalton's one of those guys where he brings a high enough ceiling that in this type of matchup at home, I'd go ahead and fire him up.
With the fact that he's at home, that makes me feel a little bit better about it. But I would probably start someone like a Matt Stafford over him this week. I just like Stafford's matchup a little bit more. But moving on, we don't need to talk about too many of the Rams players, but the Saints are headed to Houston to play the Texans. Who would have thought that the Texans would be favored against the Saints at this point in the year? But that's where we are in today's NFL. Kevin, I want you to pick one Saint player that is a must start this week.
Mark Ingram.
Mark Ingram. I like it. I actually think that he is long overdue for a touchdown. I could see this kind of being like a multi-touchdown week. The Texans have had a weak spot to touchdowns. There's no other way to put it. But is Willie Snead, is he back on the wide receiver 3 radar? Is he somebody that you could find as like a sneaky start that people may have forgotten about?
Yeah, I mean he's a sneaky start, but it's just not. I mean, it's not ideal. You're just not getting the volume that you'd like out of him. I think what you've ended up seeing is Ben Watson has just really been thrown into the equation and messed everything up for Willie Snead's potential, because you have Cooks who's still involved, and then once you have Cooks and you have Watson and you have the running backs who are always heavily targeted in that system, that Snead is just not going to get the consistent looks to be a consistent performer.
I think I would tend to agree with that, and I would say something like along the lines of he's like a Stevie Johnson, but lesser. I mean, I don't know. Is he around that range, like a Stevie Johnson, would you say?
I prefer Stevie Johnson just because there's nobody else with the Chargers. I think he's more like Stevie Johnson while Keenan Allen was still there type of Stevie Johnson.
Yeah, that's actually a good comparison. I like it. Now, we just talked about Andy Dalton. Brian Hoyer, would you start Brian Hoyer this week over Andy Dalton?
Everyone, I mean, not saying everyone, because obviously everyone doesn't love him. A lot of people would probably throw up in their mouths thinking about starting him, but a lot of the streamer types like him a lot. And, whenever you hear these stats about how every quarterback has done well against the Saints, I mean, it's still predicated on scoring touchdowns, which should happen in this matchup, but you never know. They could just grind it out. So I think he's a solid option. But if you were to choose between someone like Andy Dalton and Brian Hoyer, some people would say they take Hoyer, but I would still take Dalton.
I could appreciate your loyalty to Andy Dalton, but I would take Hoyer just because, like, when you look at it, the Saints defense, I know they lost Rob Ryan over the bye, and that's got to help, right? But
can't be any worse.
No, they definitely can't. But 17 touchdowns in the last 4 games. Like, that's just ridiculous. They have not allowed – actually, there's been one game this year where they've allowed fewer than 17 points to an opposing quarterback, and that was to Dallas back in week 4 when Brandon Weeden was starting against them. So I like Hoyer. I mean, I guess part of a concern would be that they try and play keep away from Breeze and they run the ball with Blue quite a bit. Mm-hmm. I mean, I guess that would be my legit concern about him.
Right.
But I think he's got a really, really high floor. I think that you literally can depend like a lock for 275 and a touchdown.
My only concern is, obviously Breeze is not a great road quarterback, but this seems like a decent surface.
It's in a dome. Yeah, it's in a
dome for him. So you never know. I mean, if Breeze comes out and drops a quick 14, 21 points on the board, it could get ugly. So that's my only concern with someone like Hoyer.
I understand that, and I do have a few reservations about him. I just think he's a good safe floor guy.
Right.
But moving on to the Bucks at the Colts. Now, this one, Vincent Jackson came back last week. I didn't think he was going to play, but he did, and he scored. Now, he's a player that I had on quite a few benches, and I actually debated dropping him a few times. But now I'm caught in this weird place with him, where I feel like I should start him this week. If Vontae Davis is playing, and I believe he's slated to, he'll be shadowing, Mike Evans around the field, I would assume. So that's going to leave him in the slot, like Vincent Jackson in the slot against Greg Toller. Is that who's going to be up against him then? So is Vincent Jackson a sneaky start this week where he could finish as a top 20 receiver?
I don't know, man. That's a tough one. I mean, number one, is Vontae Davis still any good? I'm not sure about that.
That's a good question. I mean, Julio is beating him around the field, but I mean, come on, it's Julio.
Yeah, no, I think what happened was Davis seems to be living off of this reputation of holding Watkins catchless in week 1, and then after that, I don't know if he's really been that fantastic. But obviously, the wide receiver twos have kind of feasted on that team. I mean, I think it's difficult to trust Jackson, but he's a guy that you could definitely plug in there if you're thin at the position.
Well, yeah, and I'm not saying that you're going to bench Mike Evans because the Vontae Davis is a man that you cannot break through. I mean, come on, like he has been playing pretty bad this year. I'm not even going to lie about it, but he's an above average corner, so we could say that. Right. I'm not shying away from playing Mike Evans. But Vincent Jackson, I just think that he's somebody that it wouldn't shock me if he did finish as a top 20 receiver this week. And with the way Jameis Winston's playing, I mean, did you know, Kevin, I don't even know if you knew this, but I like literally was digging through second half of the season numbers this week. And from week 6 through 11, did you know that we have, there's the quarterback rating that they have for the NFL, and then we have PFF rating for quarterbacks. Mm-hmm. Do you know that Jameis Winston is the number one quarterback that we have rated from week 6 through 11?
I did not know that. I mean, it wouldn't surprise me that much. He obviously had a huge blow up game last week, and I mean, he's been playing well. I mean, the key is cutting down on those turnovers, and he's one of those guys where if things started to click, you could see good things happening because he wasn't playing Alex Smith ball. He was pushing the ball down the field, so at least that's the way you're really going to improve and get better. So he seems to have done that, and he has the weapons. I mean, he definitely has the weapons, so that's helpful.
He really does. I'm curious to see what this offense is going to look like, now that he is maturing. And then he's got Mike Evans, he's got Vincent Jackson, the third receiver. We're still lacking there. But then you have Austin Seferian-Jenkins, which I don't know if he's ever going to return. I don't know, because
he hasn't been clear for contact. Although last week, I think somebody, I don't know if it was Scheffner, somebody said that they thought he was going to be back in week 12. But they have the running game too. I think that's very important and for helping the quarterback, especially when you can play action.
Yep, Charles Sims has been playing well. I think that's been overshadowed by Doug Martin. Doug Martin running for 240 yards last week without a touchdown. That was pretty impressive.
Yeah, it was impressive. It's always weird in PPR leagues to see Doug Martin score 23 points and then you see Sean Drone score like 17.
Yeah, no, that's
on 8 catches for 40 yards.
That's the disappointing part about PPR is like that that stuff can happen, but Sean Drone, no. But on the other side of the ball, the Colts, what do you do with T.Y. Hilton and Dante Moncrief right now? We knew that Moncrief didn't play that well with Matt Hasselbeck, but what about T.Y. Hilton? Are you going to feel comfortable starting him ever again?
Well, I mean, I think you're probably gonna plug him in there, but you're not gonna feel great about it. I mean, the Buccaneers defense has been one of those defenses where they've actually scored a decent amount of points from a fantasy perspective, but they haven't been great stopping the other team scoring real points. So there's always the possibility to put some stuff on the board.
Yeah. I don't know. This matchup it's great. There are no shutdown corners for T.Y. Hilton to go up against this week. He's been struggling against them. And this could be a week where I would use him and I guess be a little bit comfortable with it. I think with them being at home, I think it's fitting. And I think T.Y. Hilton, this is one of those weeks you could start him. The Chargers at the Jags, Bortles or Rivers?
Bortles.
Yeah.
No question about it. I mean, Rivers he's starting his second half of the season decline into the depths. I mean, the thing is interesting. I mean, this is about a lot more than Keenan Allen. But I remember when Keenan Allen went down, I was thinking to myself, I don't know about Rivers because Rivers is a guy that I had in some leagues, and he had reached that status, how he's playing over the first half of the year, where I was willing to kind of drop my backup and just say I'm going to ride Rivers the rest of the season. But, this happened to him last year. I guess there may have been an injury on his part last year, but there's a similar thing going on with the offensive line falling apart. And that offense has just grinded to a complete halt the last couple of weeks. So I think you have to be very touchy about what's going on with Rivers, and the fact that they're on the road doesn't help. If they were at home, I would say maybe it's a coin flip, but on the road, I would rather have Bortles at home.
It's weird because I'm in like this confidence pool, and then like at first glance I was like, all right, I'm picking the Jaguars, and then I was like, man, am I really picking the Jaguars and Blake Bortles over Phillip Rivers? So I tried putting that together in my mind and trying to think about who first off would win the game, and then putting the stats there to back it up. And Bortles ended up higher for me, but it was closer than I guess I would have thought it would have been. And I am concerned that the biggest concern is Phillip Rivers' offensive line. But the weird part is he's had a very bad offensive line for a long time. It's not like these injuries just made it bad.
Right.
It was bad to begin with, and then the injuries have just made it worse. And
right.
It's not to the point where he literally can't stand there for 2 seconds without getting hit. It's gotten to the point where it's frustrating. But when you're choosing between Rivers and Bortles, the best part is like when you play daily fantasy at DraftKings.com, that's a decision that you do not have to make. Like in your lineup, you get to choose any quarterback you want. There are millions being won each week. Every play in every game could take you closer to a life-changing payday. This is not fantasy as usual. This is DraftKings. Welcome to the big time. Hurry to DraftKings.com now and use promo code PFF to play for free with your first deposit in this Sunday's $1 million fantasy football contest. First place takes home $100,000. Enter PFF for free entry now at DraftKings.com. That is DraftKings.com. Kevin, last week in my Millionaire Maker lineup, I usually try and play one a week, and then I'll do a bunch of other smaller ones. And I actually made it a point to switch out when I heard that Thomas Rawls was going to start for Marshawn Lynch. I went and swapped him out, and it actually made me some money. I'm not going to say I won thousands. Like one of my buddies actually, he won 8,000 I think this week in the Millionaire Maker. He finished I think it was number 16, which is pretty impressive.
Well, it helps when everyone else's lineups just completely implode.
Yes, I think under 200 points won it. I think it won.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. I love that putting Rawls in. I remember when it was for number one. I mean, it's been very frustrating because I have Rawls on a bunch of teams. These late starts for Seattle are extremely frustrating because last week they said Lynch wasn't going to go, so I plugged Rawls into all these lineups during the Sunday night game, and then that was just a bust. But this week, I did put him in across the board. I was kind of surprised when some people were saying, oh, without Lynch, Rawls is maybe a low-end RB1. I mean, they're playing the San Francisco 49ers at home. It was a dream matchup, and what a result.
Yes, no, the result was something magical, and like I said, I swapped him out in a lot of lineups, and unfortunately, Charkandrick West let me down a little bit, but I think everybody owned him, like I really did, because he was so cheap. He was like,
you got one big catch at least before going down,
yeah. But moving on through the games, we are more than halfway through, but this one is a rematch of a Week 4 matchup. I want to say it was the Dolphins at the Jets. That's the game that took place in London. You remember that morning where Chris Ivory was running all over them?
Yeah, they left Philman in London, I think.
Yeah, I think they did. And I haven't heard from him since. So is Chris Ivory a top 10 running back this week?
I don't know. I mean, Ivory's one of these guys where I'm pretty disappointed because I liked him. I mean, this is a while ago. This is after a few weeks into the season. I was saying how much I like Chris Ivory this year because I thought that offense would be functional, and that's something that Chris Ivory just hasn't really had in his career. So it's kind of gone back to being dysfunctional, though, recently. I mean, they're favored. They're at home, but then again, they were favored last week against Houston, and everything imploded. So I think you got to continue to put them in there and just hope that the fact that they're favored, they're at home, one of these times they're going to put up a performance that you can like, and he should be used. One of the down parts, though, was with Bilal Paul back. People kind of underestimated how involved he is in the offense, and they went out of their way to re-sign him in the offseason. So Ivory has risk because if they get down, Powell's going to get most of the snaps.
Yeah, and well, the thing is that's the reason I like Ivory. I just don't see them going down. I really don't.
Miami's not going down last week either, but that's the problem. Yeah,
I guess that is true. I mean, against Houston, who would have thought? But on the other side, I mean, I like Ivory just because I don't believe in Miami's offense right now. But a big part of it relies on Darrelle Revis. Apparently, he couldn't stay in the meeting today because of his concussion. I don't know if he's going to play or not. But here's a question for you, Kevin. If Darrelle Revis plays, our own Mike Clay is saying that he believes that Revis will shadow Landry. Okay, so if that is indeed the case, let's pretend that Revis does play. Would you start Rashard Matthews over Jarvis Landry?
No, I don't think so. I mean. No. I don't know what's. I mean, Landry plays so close to the line of scrimmage that I think he can continue to get heavily targeted and just not break anything longer. But we'll end up seeing what's happening. I don't know if Revis really likes to go in the slot a lot and other things too. So we'll see. I just don't believe Revis is really going to be shadowing him 100%.
Well, last time they played, 4 catches for 40 yards for Landry. And let's see, Rashard Matthews, 1 catch for 16 yards. So they both disappointed. The weird part is that Rashard Matthews has more receiving yards and touchdowns than Jarvis Landry does this year. The rushing yards have put Landry a little bit over the top. But it's a weird thing where I know Revis got lit up last week. Jesus, DeAndre Hopkins, man,
could have been worse too.
And it should have been worse. Yes, it definitely should have been. Like the thing, the guy. I don't know. I don't even know what to say about DeAndre Hopkins. I think we could do a whole show on how good of a route runner he is. Like, I don't know. He made Revis look like a bad corner last week.
Revis has been, there's something interesting going on with Revis recently. I noticed that it seems like he had been giving up a little bit more of the underneath stuff because he didn't want to get burnt deep. And then last week we saw why. Yeah.
Yeah, and the one that he was underthrown on when Hopkins was, he did this zigzag route and then went down the sideline. He burned Revis, and like you said, the ball was just off. It should have been a touchdown. It
That
should have been.
recovery speed. Reeves just doesn't seem to have that recovery speed because I mean, let's face it, Hopkins isn't exactly a burner, but once he could use his body to get separation, and well, I mean, on the second play, he kind of used his body to the actual touchdown to get separation, and Reeves just couldn't recover.
Yeah, no, I thought it was garbage. Did you hear who the AFC Player of the Week, Offensive Player of the Week was?
Yeah, I did. You don't like Brock, the Brockinator? I thought that was just like that's kind of a slap in the face of Peyton Manning or something. I mean, what's going on there? I mean, this guy at first he gets benched, then it's like the NFL is telling him not to come back or something.
Yeah, and now he's already saying that he wants to play again next year, and the Broncos are done with it.
Where is he going to play? Like, who's going to have? Who's
the Jets?
No, I mean, I'd rather have Fitzpatrick.
Seriously, I could see like a Brett Favre type thing going on with Peyton Manning right now, and it's sad. I don't want to see it.
I think the Jets fans have had enough misery.
I couldn't agree with you more, but Peyton Manning wouldn't agree. But moving on, we don't need to talk about that game anymore. The Vikings and the Falcons. Obviously, the Falcons have been a huge disappointment recently. Devonta Freeman going down early last week. Man,
not looking good this week also.
No, it started out looking good where Dan Quinn said, it's looking good. He's still in the first phase, but it's looking good. And, usually those superstars make it through the concussion protocol faster than others do.
He took a pretty nasty hit, though.
He really did. And he's not the type.
That was right on the temple. He got knocked. I mean, the ball just fell right out after that. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, he definitely did. And a guy of his size usually doesn't take hits like that. But it was unfortunate because he'd been playing well, and I think he was in line for a big game. Unfortunately, Tevin Coleman came in, and he didn't look very good. But
no, he did not.
But he made
one game. I mean, let's not. Some people were like, "Oh, Tevin Coleman, he's done." I mean, going into the game, they were averaging the same exact yards per carry, so let's not. We shouldn't get too far out ahead of ourselves. But Coleman doesn't really bring the upside in the passing game. That's one of the problems.
That is, and he's not game script proof and all that stuff. But I agree with you 100% that people jumping off Tevin Coleman because of one bad game where he may have not even been mentally prepared to go into that game. You know what I mean?
Freeman had a whole bad season last year, so
right.
Yeah.
Yeah. I didn't even think I would ever try and remember what Freeman did in his rookie year because he was pretty bad. A lot of people didn't think he would be even in the NFL. If 2 years later they didn't think he'd be in the NFL, and look where we are now. So, I was actually having that conversation with someone on Twitter. Where do you think Devonta Freeman's going to get drafted next year in fantasy drafts?
No, I mean, he should get drafted in the first round. I mean, and right near the top, probably in the top 4 picks or something like that.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that he'd be in the middle of the first round, right around there. But for moving on from them, like Tevin Coleman, what are your expectations for him? Would you play him this? Like, let's pretend that Freeman's out. Where do you rank Tevin Coleman amongst running backs?
It's tough. I haven't done any rankings this week, so it's tough to say. But I would think that he flirts with being an RB1 just because for volume. I mean, he did get 70% of the carries, I think, last game. After is even higher than that when you account for the fact that Freeman was gone. He was targeted a couple of times. He didn't no catches, of course. So they're predicted to score 24 points. They're at home. I think he brings a lot of upside just because of the volume that he's going to be locked in at. I mean, you just can't find volume on capable offenses at the running back position from many guys.
Yeah, it's kind of rare to see the volume that he could potentially get against the Vikings. Now, the Vikings have been really good against the run, though. I mean, they've been better than I expected them to be.
Right.
And Tevin Coleman, by the way, did get targeted twice in the pass game last week. Do you know that he has 6 targets on the year? He's only caught in 1 of them. That's extremely low for a running back to have a 16% catch rate.
Yeah, it's not ideal. But then again, like I mentioned, it's low. We're talking about small samples.
Small samples, yes, yeah. Absolutely. And I agree with you on that. But on the other side, Minnesota, what do you do with Stephon Diggs right now?
I mean, I don't know. The problem with Diggs is he needs, I mean, if they need to really pump up that passing game and to stretch the field a little bit more. I mean, I think Diggs is still a guy that you're going to start if you don't have a top 20 option to plug in instead of him. He still should be the number 1 receiver. I mean, Wallace is doing absolutely nothing there. So I think Diggs is still a guy that you're going to start. I mean, the wide receiver position is a little bit fluky. What can go on from week to week, and you just hope that he's able to put up a big performance.
Yeah, and
I mean, this sets up as a game where he could do well.
it really does, but the thing is how much can you trust him after 3 games of 66 yards or less? That's the tough part. Is I still believe he's the number one option. I don't even know what happened to Mike Wallace. Like I know that he wasn't very good, but he was never like 0 yards. Like and over the past I don't know month and a half, he's been nothing. Like literally nothing.
Yeah, when he went from Tannehill to Bridgewater, that wasn't helping getting a guy who could hit him, streaking down the field like Roethlisberger could do with consistency. I mean, he's only going to mesh with someone with a huge, accurate, deep ball, and Bridgewater just doesn't have that type of arm.
No, Bridgewater hasn't taken the step forward that I thought he would. He actually looked decent last week, but on a whole, Teddy Bridgewater hasn't impressed me this year like I thought he would.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of like what we talked about with Winston. I mean, even we can talk about someone when Winston really pushing the ball downfield, taking risk. I mean, Bridgewater played well last year, but he definitely was not taking a whole lot of risks. So the potential upside, wasn't going to come from cutting down on those mistakes. He needed to push the ball down the field more. That's a little bit more difficult to do than cut down on mistakes.
I mean, Teddy. I guess Charles Johnson just made him look that good last year, right?
Yeah, I think Johnson got a little bit overhyped, quite honestly. But
I know he did. I was never a huge.
I mean, I liked him too. I mean, I liked him as a end of your dynasty roster bench stash, but where he was being drafted this year was was getting a little absurd.
It really was. And when I don't know, when you're cut off of a few teams and practice squads, I think it's a telltale sign most of the time. And like Christine, Chris Michael.
Yeah. Robert Turbin. It's all about the Robert Turbin train.
Robert Turbin, pick him up now. I'm kidding. But I'm guessing he's McFadden's like a handcuff right now, right?
Yeah, I mean, if anyone's going to go down, it could be McFadden, right?
I guess it's kind of true. The next game, I'm going to ask you one question about this game: the Giants at the Redskins. And this is a tough one. This is a lot tougher than it should be. But if you were to start one running back from the Giants and one running back from the Redskins, who would it be?
Jesus. I guess I'd start Vereen on the Giants just because I feel the least bad about starting him. And then for the Redskins, oh gosh, I don't even know. I honestly don't know who to start on that team. I mean, maybe you start Matt Jones. I guess they still like him. They probably want to give him more of an extended audition this year just because Alfred Morris is probably going to be gone. So I guess Jones. You'd have to really plug your nose though on that one.
Yeah, I agree on Jones. And if I'm actually starting a Giants running back, I'd probably start Rashad Jennings this week. Washington's been so awful against the run. I don't think that the Giants are going to have to use Vereen in the passing game this week. Eli does pretty well against them. He has the last couple times they played, and I think Odell Beckham goes off. I mean, that's not going out on a limb or anything like that. But I don't think that they need to use Vereen. I think that Rashad Jennings, if I'm going to choose one, I would go with him. But the Matt Jones thing, I agree. He should be getting the ball more to see, is this the guy of our future? I think he has to be, considering where they drafted him, and Alfred Morris is going to be gone. A quick question. Where do you see Alfred Morris ending up next year? Do you have like a landing spot that you'd like to see him?
That's really a tough one because, he doesn't catch the ball, but I think he's a hell of a runner. So where I'd like to see him go is someplace where he could play with a lead. I mean, this is obviously not going to happen because Belichick doesn't like to pay anybody, but he may not have to pay much for it. But if he could be like the early down back for the Patriots or something like that, man, he could have a monster season.
It would be nice. And I think LeGarrette Blount's a free agent after this year, is he not?
Yeah, I mean, he was a free agent, whenever it was last year and 2 years ago, and they let him walk, right. to go to the Steelers. So I don't think they're in love with LeGarrette Blount. He's a decent runner, but I mean, Morris is better than Blount, in my opinion.
I agree. I actually agree with that. All right. So, like I said, I didn't want to spend much time on that game. Raiders at Titans. Does Derek Carr and this Raiders offense bounce back? Like, what happened last week?
I don't know, but the only reason that I'll cut him some slack on that is the week prior, Aaron Rodgers at home did nothing against the Lions. So there's been a really interesting I mean, I guess I shouldn't say it's that interesting because defenses are pretty unpredictable. But there have been some defenses that have kind of flipped on their head. I mean, Kansas City went from being a complete punching bag to looking dominant. Detroit Lions were basically like you could just put a 40 on the board if you're playing against them. And then they've shut down Aaron Rodgers and Derek Carr in back-to-back weeks. So it's tough to say. I mean, nothing's happened, fundamentally changed on that offense like you've seen with Phillip Rivers where you've had some personnel issues. So I think Carr will probably bounce back.
Okay. I will. With the secondary that they have in Tennessee, I would be worried if he didn't bounce back.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Yeah.
I would tend to agree. I think he's a top 10 quarterback play this week. I think Amari Cooper and Michael Crabtree can get back on track. Specifically, Amari Cooper with his 1-catch, 4-yard performance. The other question I wanted to ask you about that game is David Cobb. I mean, I told people when people were asking me about him, if they should pick him up in their league, should they do this? And I felt like he was literally going to be a wasted bench spot. I mean, I still feel like that. I know that I'm not talking about his just one game either. I just don't think his talent is anything that's going to wow anybody. And Antonio Andrews is a plotter himself, but they appear to be set with him. What's your take? Do you think that David Cobb should be on someone's roster?
No way, not at all. I mean, Antonio Andrews has kind of already shown you what the ceiling of that type of role would be, and that's without even Cobb there. So if Cobb has to split things with Andrews, then the ceiling is, basically a foot off of the floor. So I don't think he has any value.
I couldn't have said it better myself, and that's why I've been saying all along that David Cobb, he was a wasted spot. I never liked him to begin with, and yep, it's Andrews' role, and he's not playing particularly bad, so I don't see any reason for the switch. Now, maybe Bishop Sankey will be back active this week because because Derek
the name should not be broken.
I give up. Cardinals at the 49ers. We don't need to talk too much about this game, but the one question I did want to ask is, what is your comfort level right now with John Brown?
I think that, I mean, the thing with Brown and the thing with is that receiving, if all 3 receiving options are healthy, obviously Floyd really isn't, that it's difficult. But I think there is an interesting wrinkle though, because Fells is out now, right? And he was a guy that was getting a lot more, especially touchdowns, than anyone kind of suspected. So I think I'm fairly comfortable with Brown down the stretch, being a decent contributor. I just wouldn't, expect him to put up top 15 wide receiver numbers.
No, top 25 maybe. I think that's where he's kind of at when you take out all the bye weeks and everything like that, and you got everybody playing. He's a top 30 receiver for me, maybe top 25. He's going to be a little bit of a hit or miss guy, but he seems to be getting healthy, which is always a good thing. But like I said, we didn't want to talk too much about that game. The Seattle Seahawks are hosting the Steelers. I don't want to really ask any specific questions about this game. I just want to know our takes on this game. I want to talk about how we see this game flow going. I view this as a game where people are worried about Roethlisberger, but let's face it, Seattle's defense isn't the same since Dan Quinn has left. I think Antonio Brown is somebody that can burn Richard Sherman. They're going to trust him in man coverage. They may shade a safety sometimes, but that's the thing. Are you really going to leave Kerry Williams sit there, on the other side of the field against Martavis Bryant? No. I think that they have to shade a safety over Martavis Bryant's way quite a bit, and I think that they trust Richard Sherman in man coverage against Antonio Brown. And for that reason, I am not worried about starting Ben Roethlisberger this week. I think that there's going to be touchdowns to be had, which I think D'Angelo Williams can be a fine play as a low-end RB1, high-end 2. And on the other side of the field, I think that Russell Wilson's actually a fine play this week. What's your take on the game script? Are you following me here? Do you think that it could be a defensive dominated game?
Well, I mean, the Seahawks defense has just not been the same this year, especially against the pass. And I think a lot of people focus on the secondary, but a lot of the success of the secondary is predicated on the front 4 able to get pressure on the quarterback. I mean, there's no secondary that can keep receivers covered if they have a lot of time, and the Seattle front 4 just hasn't been doing the job this year. So I think Roethlisberger should have a big game. As far as what Sherman's going to do, or who may be the option there, I mean, I don't know if I don't necessarily see Sherman, shadowing someone like Antonio Brown as even being a good option. I think Sherman maybe shutting down someone like Martavis Bryant makes a little bit more sense, and then rotating coverage towards Brown. So we'll have to end up seeing how that works out. But I think both teams you're gonna be confident and probably start the guys that you would be starting elsewhere. You're not gonna look at this as a matchup that you're gonna want to shy away from anyone because you see the big bad Seattle Seahawks defense.
Well, right. So I think we're on the same page about the offense. Now, but a lot of people are talking about Thomas Rawls and the fact they think that he needs to be played, and he's like a top 10 guy. I'm not so much like in love with Thomas Rawls. Like, he made me some money last week, I'm not gonna lie, but I also seen some things today comparing him, saying, well, he's averaged 6.0 yards per carry this year. The best Marshawn Lynch ever averaged was 5.0. So instead, de facto, Rawls greater than Lynch. Like, it's gone way overboard. What do you think about Rawls this week? I mean, Pittsburgh's been really good against the run.
Yeah, Pittsburgh has been pretty good against the run, but you never know how much of playing well against the run kind of means that you've been winning games versus you've really been strong against the run. I mean, Seattle's going to be committed to running the ball, and I think Rawls has been good. And what Rawls showed last week, which I'll be really interested to see this week, is how much more they can get him involved in the passing game. Obviously, he had the 3 catches. He had the really long touchdown. But he was making it look easy on some passes that weren't right in the breadbasket. So I just feel like Rawls is one of those guys that he's just going to get such good volume, and then they're going to be committed to the run. They're playing at home. That, yeah, I mean, I think he's easily a top 10 option, even if you figure it's in a bad matchup, just because he's going to see that type of volume, and he's shown that he can be effective.
The thing that worries me, and that people are kind of overlooking a bit, like, the Steelers have been winning games. They've been winning when Roethlisberger's playing by quite a bit, which obviously changes game script. But there also was quite a few games in between there that they played with Landry Jones and Mike Vick. The Steelers defense has only allowed 1 rushing touchdown in the year. So that's the part of me that says I don't view Thomas Rawls as an RB1 this week. I think he's a strong 2, just because, like you said, the workload's going to be there. I just view this game as being one where the Steelers can jump out. Like, I just feel like that I don't see Seattle being in control of this game. That's, I guess, where it all comes down to. And
yeah, that'll be interesting. Seattle is favored. They're a 4.5-point favorite.
They're 4.5-point favorites over Pittsburgh. I didn't think that they'd be that.
It's at home, so I mean, we'll end up seeing what's happening. But if you look, I mean, I know you've said that the Steelers' defense has been good against the run, but if you start to look at some of the teams that they've played, I mean, Baltimore Ravens haven't gotten anything going against the run. This is all these games without Roethlisberger. San Diego Chargers. I mean, the Cardinals have been okay. They've actually been okay as far as putting up numbers, but still, you're talking about Chris Johnson here. Mm-hmm. So, they've played against some matchups that they've had some favorable matchups in that stretch. They had the Rams before Gurley was there. So, I think that they've, like you said, they've definitely been effective against the run, but I don't know if they're such a threat for being a run stopper, especially if they're going to be an underdog.
Yeah, this is one game that I'm more excited to watch than a lot of other ones, to be honest with you. And I'm usually not so much into watching Seattle games for whatever that's worth. But the next one, I don't want to spend too much time. We want to wrap this up. But the Patriots and the Broncos. This was supposed to be Brady versus Manning on Sunday Night Football. It's going to be Brady versus Osweiler. Is Brady going to be okay? Is Brady going to be okay with this offensive line? All the hiccups it's had, Danny Amendola looking to possibly miss some time. I don't even know who's going to be starting at wide receiver. I know Aaron Dobson got nicked up. So you have LaFell, and I mean, who's playing? Is Brady going to be okay? I guess that's my question.
I think Brady will be okay. I mean, I think most of the pieces in that offense, I would say, other than Gronkowski, are replaceable, but then Gronkowski hasn't even been that much of a force this year. So I think the pieces are pretty replaceable. I mean, I think the Dion Lewis injury was interesting because it kind of changed not necessarily how effective that the offense is going to be. Maybe they're slightly less effective without him, but it kind of changed what they were doing as far as really going pedal to the metal, playing quickly, throwing the ball a whole lot. I mean, they're still throwing the ball a lot, but if you just have to look at that Buffalo Bills game. And that Buffalo Bills game, they were just throttling it, even when they were up by 20 points. Going into the second half, and LeGarrette Blount was getting a lot of carries this last week. So I think it's kind of changed the the ceiling of that offense. I think Tom Brady is still going to be he's a top 5 option pretty much every week that he's going to play, but he just isn't going to be that number 1 option, head and shoulders way above everyone else like he was before.
Yeah, I just worry about him this week. Obviously, especially if he's out without Amendola and some of the other options. Gronk, I think the reason Gronk struggled is because he's being held into block more often than he's ever been. They're doing this weird thing where they're shifting in and out offensive lines, and I don't know how easy that is for someone like LeGarrette Blount to get anything going, to be honest with you, and you have no idea who's blocking in front of you half the time. But on the other side, Brock Osweiler, what do you think he's doing for this Denver offense? I know it's only one game. I watched the game. I have no idea how the guy won Offensive Player of the Week. Like literally no idea.
Right.
The throw to Demaryius Thomas was him wide open with nobody within 10 yards of him, and it was a running catch. And then the Cody Latimer one was a short one. Like, the run game actually carried them more than anything.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that you just said it. It's the run game, and what he's able to do is when you saw them playing the directional sort of flows that works with that offense, where they're coming in one direction or bootlegging out the other direction and doing that type of stuff, and really kind of setting up the patient zone blocking scheme, that they're able to do that now. They're able to have someone go under center and run that type of offense where they weren't doing that all with Peyton Manning. So I think it could open up the running game. I think that's what it also does, is it kind of takes blockers that normally aren't that great, like you saw in Baltimore last year, and makes them much more effective. So I think that's going to be the big key. I hope that Osweiler will start stretching the field a little bit more, and perhaps he'll do that if they have to put up points, like they'll have to put up points against the Patriots. But, I mean, he was throwing it to the tight ends a lot. I mean, the combined tight end targets and catches were pretty huge there. And like you mentioned, Demaryius Thomas, it would have been a complete bust if it weren't for that one catch, and Emmanuel Sanders wasn't even playing.
Right. And that's the part I wish that we could see. I wish we could see him play in a comeback mode against the Patriots, but I don't know if that's going to happen. I just don't know if the Patriots are going to put up the points that they normally would, especially considering that this game's being played in Denver. I have Brady outside of my top 5 quarterbacks this week. I didn't think that would happen, but I think I have him around 8. So it's not like I'm saying you bench him, but I just don't think that he's the best option this week in Denver with some of the lack of options he's got, is what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, I can see that.
If Emmanuel Sanders comes back, I mean, he's somebody that I'm hesitant on playing.
Totally. I'm not sure how Sanders and Thomas are going to be able to both put up production on that team.
Yeah, I agree, and I just don't think they're going to throw the ball 40 times a game. So, I
mean, for PPR, even if Manning had no arm left, at least he was throwing it a ton.
It's true. I mean, I guess we're looking for the big plays rather than the short ones now. I guess that's what we have to hope for, but it worked for Emmanuel Sanders. I just don't know if it's going to work with Osweiler. So if you have somebody like John Brown and Emmanuel Sanders, I'd play Brown over Sanders just to see.
No, definitely. Yeah.
See how that goes. I don't know if we should just skip over the Monday night game. But the Ravens at the Browns, this was supposed to be the Johnny Manziel show. But now it's Matt Schaub versus Josh McCown. I mean, the only question I have about this game that I was hoping you'd answer is just that Javorius Buck Allen, is he a solid RB2? I know we talked about, volume and what it means to have a running back that gets as much volume as he's probably going to get.
Yeah.
Are you comfortable with him as like a top 15, top 18 option?
Yeah, I think I'm comfortable with him in that range. I mean, like we've said many times before, when we talk about the running back landscape, once you get past the first 10, 12 guys, if you say, hey, here's a guy who's going to get 70% of the carries and he's going to be involved in the passing game, that's pretty much checks. Doesn't even matter who's playing. It checks those boxes, because even if you're down a bunch, you can get targeted. And Schaub is throws a lot of pick sixes, but he was effective a couple of years ago. I mean, who knows what will end up happening? This is not a Blaine Gabbert situation where there's really no chance of any upside, I don't think. And even Gabbert would won a game, so who knows what can happen.
Yeah, I think the Browns defense is one that you could actually stream, considering how long it's been.
Oh, yeah, I'm picking him up, definitely.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. But Allen, yeah, he's somebody you could play against a Browns defense that's not very good against the run. I think we have them ranked as the second worst run defense in the league here at PFF. So there's not much else to talk about there. Obviously, Travis Benjamin and Gary Barnidge get bumps, obviously back in the right direction. With
Duke Johnson, too. I'd like to see him get a little more involved.
Yeah, Duke Johnson, obviously, like everybody there benefits from Josh McCown starting. That's how I feel about that.
I agree.
But that pretty much wraps it up, guys. I know it ran a little bit long today, but we went through an entire slate of games, all 16 games. Definitely looking forward to watching some good football, eating a whole bunch of food, probably more than we probably should tomorrow. But we got some good games on the slate. So, guys, don't forget, you can subscribe to PFF Radio on iTunes, listen up on Stitcher, Blog Talk Radio, and watch the show on YouTube as well as Fantasy Sports Network. You can follow Kevin at Cole_Kev. Myself at Mike Tagliere NFL. We are active on Twitter. We like talking with you guys. And if you guys would like the PFF Gold, guys, I know we're closing towards the end of the year, but for DFS purposes, you can use the DFS optimizer on there. $29.99. It could pay for itself. That's going to wrap it up, guys. Good luck. Hope to see you next week. And yeah, till next time, lights out.